Now, this brings up one last point that I would like to make, and that is about authorship. Authorship would be the next point that I want to go over as a filter to look at the scriptures. Of course, there's a lot of things we can look at as filters or paradigms, lenses, but this is the third one I would like to talk about. We've talked about the higher and lower law. Number one, we've talked secondly about temple theology or temple imagery. And now authorship, I think, is a very important point. And this is what I mean by that, and nothing that complicated. We oftentimes look at the scriptures as if somebody is writing down what is happening as it happens. Kind of like if you're watching sports and the play-by-play guy is going on about, a football game. And, is talking about it. The ball is snapped, the quarterback drops back into the pocket, the rush is on, the pocket is collapsing, he moves up, throws a strike onto the sideline, first down. That's not what's happening here, right? This is something that happens much, much later, decades probably later, from what has originally occurred. And in many cases, it's not even a firsthand account. So I want you to put yourself in the shoes of any of these authors of the scriptures. Let's say, for example, one of the Gospels. And you're writing about this, and even if you did witness this yourself, some of these things yourself, but it's decades later, how are you going to write this? Let's say that you are very inspired and you feel very close to the Lord, you've got the Spirit with you, and you want to be effective in this witness to Jesus as the Christ and these principles of the gospel and this bringing in of the higher law. How are you going to write this? You have time to think about that. And you're going to organize it in a certain way that brings up specific points. And in some cases, you might even exaggerate to get a point across. In some other cases, you might leave things out to get a point across. Other times, you might use a little bit of storytelling to be able to get the principle stated differently. You might even move events around sometimes to be able to get an overall flow to the message that you are trying to bring across. So let's say that you have this and now you're trying to write a play about it. And you are going to have actors that speak and that are representing the original characters. What are you going to have them say? You have some things that might be taken directly as actual words that were written, some things that are secondhand. How are you going to do that? And how are you going to be effective for that audience to get the right story and to get the message of something, of course, here so imperatively important that you're going to get that across. So think about how these narratives are composed. We have an example here of how Jesus is the healer, right? We have these two chapters that are brought together. It's overall in all of the Gospels, he's shown as the healer. But here specifically, Matthew and Mark go in and focus in on him as the healer, and not just the physical healer, but let's get the message across. They're thinking, I believe, that he is the Savior of the world, that he is the spiritual healer as well. And so that's how the narration is going to come across. And that's how they're thinking. And so if we move ourselves back and try not to read this as specifically a line-by-line, play-by-play action history, but as a narrative that is meant for us to try and understand, then I think we can understand the scriptures a little bit better.